So, so good morning. I want to extend a warm welcome to you today. Everyone is welcome here. You are welcome here regardless of your age, your race, your income, your religion, or the gender with which you identify. You are welcome here regardless of who you love, who you vote for, the regrets that burden you, or the mistakes you have made. In this safe community, we support each other in the sacred task of becoming, celebrate the transcending mystery of life, and rely on the transforming power of love. Here, we revere the words of the great teachers, such as Jesus, the Buddha, and Confucius. It is, however, the task of every UU to be their own Buddha, their own Jesus, or their own Confucius. It is our work as a community to walk with each other along the spiritual pathways that lead towards happiness, compassion, and life fully lived. And while we are a safe harbor where there is solace and healing, we are also a launching pad from which we are propelled into the tumult of life to live courageously, justly, and lovingly. In this sacred place, we create the structures that lift up the downtrodden, set the captives free, and heal the brokenhearted. Here, we have learned to be fully human, that to be fully human is to be fully divine, and that with a little help from our friends, we can each tell our own unique story. So today is the day before Labor Day, and our celebration today is going to be about labor, a little bit about organized labor, and maybe a lot about how your work can be a spiritual discipline. So the next segment of our service is why my work is important to me, or I asked several people to take part in this, but this is actually for everybody. So I asked about maybe 5 or 6 folks if they'd share in 90 seconds or less about either their first job or the job they're doing right now, or the best job or the worst job they ever had, whatever they want to talk about labor. So let's just begin, and let's just start with Vicki. Vicki, would you want to be the number one? Everyone else knows who they are, and Ralph will be coming from Zoom, but everyone else just come on up when Vicki's done and take turns.
Yes, you may come to either microphone that you wish.
Well, I thought of what most of my jobs was working in schools or libraries. And what I liked about them is that you got to help people and work with people. And Jim said, what did you dislike about them? Well, we're talking about labor, so they're not very high paid, but that wasn't really my main gripe. My main gripe was people. So the good part was people and the bad part was people. And I'm just going to throw in what my first job was because it shows that I did mature a little. My first job was Dairy Queen, and I took that job because I liked ice cream. But everything you messed up, you got to eat. And I messed up so much that it took me at least 20 years to get over disliking ice cream. So, and who's next?
Good morning, everybody. I have felt very lucky because I had 2 wonderful careers that I really enjoyed. The first was designing clothes and fabric while I was living in Greece for 8 years. It was so much fun seeing my clothes walk down the street towards me because in Athens. And then my second career was as a photographic retoucher, and I got to work on famous artwork and commercial stuff and on movies, and it was terrific fun. I was self-employed, and the upside was I was my own boss, and the downside was the insecurity. My ex-husband was a member of the Carpenters Union for his entire company. And so I was the beneficiary of that. He employed 15 to 20 people, and it was all union all the way.
Hello, Let's see. My first job was I worked when I was 16 at the Orchards Mall. I worked with Santa Claus, and I used a Polaroid camera and took pictures of the children that were going to visit Santa. And my current job is I'm a statistician, and I work with teams of scientists who are doing health-related research and hope that someday these studies that we're doing will help people with sickle cell disease or type 1 diabetes or other chronic diseases. So it's good work, interesting and fulfilling, and my career goal is to retire soon.
Ralph, why don't you go ahead and share your 60 seconds?
Sure. What I'm going to talk about are the best times, and the best times I had were as a member of the unofficial economy, as we tend to call it. Back in college, I had two side hustles that did very well for me. One of them was selling live tapes at record conventions, and then later on, actual legitimate records. So, but back when that was the thing, if you were looking for things like the Twerp Tones live in Yugoslavia, you went to places like that to find it. So that was one. And the other one was much more straightforward, and that was collecting cans. And I made about 100 to 125 a week doing that as a student, which was pretty good money back in the 80s, and helped me do things like buy my first bass guitar, which was $120, I believe. So I paid my friend back, whom I recruited to help me, and I gave him 1 day's take for a month to pay back the money he loaned me toward it. And then it enabled me to join the BUUF program, British University's North America Club, and fund the $800 that they charged you in order to process the paperwork so you could go to work in England. So that was another significant thing that I did. So to sum up, I never ate peanut butter and jelly. I didn't eat that much ramen. I never wore a visor, and I never wore an apron. And at the time I thought, okay, it must mean you're doing something right. So there you have it.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Ralph. And Dorothy.
Thank you.
As far as liking jobs, in the early part of my career, it wasn't whether or not I liked a job, it was whether I had a job. They were necessary for a time. I did have a variety of jobs, and fortunately my last job, which lasted about 25 years, was something I liked. But the early varieties of jobs were, for the most part, a real learning experience. One of the jobs I had was a telephone operator. Now I look around and I suppose most of you know what a telephone operator is, but if you're under 20, that's probably an unknown quantity. Anyway, I was a telephone operator one summer, and there were, I think, 10 or 12 of us in a row with these boards where you plugged in your wires. And one day I got a call from somebody. Oh, I should tell you, I grew up in Canada, in Saskatchewan. So one morning I picked up a call, and it was somebody calling from North Dakota and said they wanted to go to Saskatchewan. And I said, operator, you've reached Saskatchewan. What city or town would you like? And she said, I want to go to Saskatchewan. I said, you mean Saskatoon? No, I want to go to Saskatchewan. I said, operator, Saskatchewan is a province. It's kind of like your state of North Dakota. I need to have a city or town. She said, I want to go to Saskatchewan. I pulled the plug. I don't know, she must have gone back to her caller to find out where she wanted to go, but it didn't leave a very good impression to me of Americans. But fortunately, about 4 years later, I met another American who changed my mind, and I've been here for about 58 years, so here I am. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there, Jeff, I asked you, right? Did I ask you? I didn't, okay. Okay, well, yeah, well, come on up. We'd love to hear it. And anybody else want to share? Now's the time to do it, about a job or an experience with work.
Okay, this isn't, oh, excuse me.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
Jeff.
Yeah, this isn't about my job experience. It's actually about my wife's job experience. And she started school about 1970, or not school, she started teaching about 1970, 71. And she is a PE teacher. She's a coach. And, excuse me, the women's coaches' salaries were 60% of the men's salaries. And so my wife did not accept that whatsoever. And they also had a teachers union. She got together the rest of the women in the PE department and they sued the school. And they got a guy that was the lawyer and he hated the principal there. And so they got up and they won. They won the suit. They got their level of pay equal to the men's. And this is a time when women were just breaking the glass ceilings to different things. And then the lawyer at the end, I can sue him for this. I can sue him for that. We can go get him some more. And my wife goes, no, we got what we need. So that's my wife's story.
Rich.
This is just too tempting to resist. My first job was as a caddy at one of these country clubs that you would have found Rodney Dangerfield or people like that at. And what I learned from it was I learned to hate country clubs. After that, for about 30 years, up to the time I reached 48, I did a lot of different work, mainly trying to make money, but not doing a very good job at the work. I was fortunate to, about the age of 48, receive an opportunity to do something that I should have been doing all my life, which was to write, because I love writing. I love writing songs, poetry. I do resumes. That's where I make my money. Every day for me is just great. And, that's my story.
Julie.
Well, I worked most of my life, and I worked most of my life, and I am very grateful for Social Security.
Would someone take the microphone back to Patrice, please?
The summer of 1969, my parents pulled strings and I got a job at Nabisco. And I packed Oreos and Mr. Salty Pretzels and Lorna Doones, but I belonged to the United Confectioners and Something Union. We made $2.73 an hour, and that was like twice of what you could make anywhere else. And we wore white uniforms, hairnets with a red ribbon that had to go across your forehead, and the boys still hit on us. So that was my union experience, and it was quite interesting.
Okay, thank you, Patrice. Would anyone else have something they'd like to share? Kristen?
Good morning. It's my pleasure to have the third Sunday with you all. David and Craig and I all come from the performing arts, and together we belong to 5 unions. 4 of them are performing arts unions. And I just wanted to do a shout out to the brothers and sisters that are on the line with the writer's strike and SAG-AFTRA. And also comment on those actors who would typically take comfort in walking the boards or the stage at these times. But that is also a very depressed economy right now. And for those of you that do support the arts, I ask that you go big in this time and support artists, particularly the performing arts that are deeply suffering at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Are there others who'd like to share? Charlene.
My first job was being a soda jerk at a small drugstore. And what I learned from that job was how much fun it was to be generous. I would give people an extra scoop of ice cream or more hot fudge, extra chili in their bowl. And what I learned was that it's not the job that you learn from, it's the people.
Well said. Others? If not, Dave, would you like to come and talk to us a little bit right now?
When we talked about reflections on labor, we talked about this is Mother Jones. Talked about me featuring a labor leader. In honor of Labor Day, I'm choosing to remember legendary labor organizer, Mother Jones. Looking up details about her online led me to reading the biography Mother Jones, The Most Dangerous Woman in America by Elliot Gorn, which is fascinating. When the words I say seem really good, that's usually when I'm plagiarizing Gorn. Mary Harris was most likely born in 1837. She managed to get enough of an education to teach at a convent in her early 20s. She lived the American dream for about 6 years. She was married in 1861 to George Jones, a member and organizer of the National Union of Iron Molders. Her husband made a wage that allowed her to be a homemaker. Soon she was the mother of 3 daughters and a son. Most of the rest of Mary Harris Jones' life before she became Mother Jones was a series of tragedies. She was a poor Irish girl who fled the potato famine with her family when she was 10. Her American dream ended in 1867 when she was about 30 years old. An outbreak of yellow fever swiftly killed her husband and 4 children, all under the age of 5. After that tragedy, she moved to Chicago and opened a dressmaking business. 4 years later, she lost her home, her shop, and her possessions in the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. According to her autobiography, this led to her joining the Knights of Labor, but she did most of her works for the United Mine Workers Union. Her fame began when she transformed herself from Mary Jones into Mother Jones. This was in the mid to late 1890s when she was in her late 50s. Mother Jones exaggerated her age, reporting herself as being born in 1830. She wore old-fashioned black dresses. By 1900, she had stopped referring to herself as Mary altogether and signed her letters Mother. Soon, laborers, union officials, even presidents of the United States addressed her as Mother, and they became her boys. Most American women in the early 20th century were expected to lead quiet, homebound lives for their families. Few women found their way onto the public stage. By making herself into a symbolic mother of the downtrodden,
Mother Jones was able to go where she pleased and speak on any issue that moved her. During the early 20th century, Mother Jones was one of the most famous women in America. For over 25 years, she held center stage exposing disturbing truths about child labor, the poverty of working families, and the destruction of American freedom. Her admirers called her labor's Joan of Arc and the miner's angel. Her enemies labeled her a dangerous radical. West Virginia District Attorney Reese Blizzard declared, "There sits the most dangerous woman in America," at her 1902 trial for ignoring an injunction banning meetings by striking miners. "She comes into a state where peace and prosperity reign, crooks her finger, and 20,000 contented men lay down their tools and walk out." Yeah, John Brophy, former miner and union organizer, worked with Mother Jones, wrote of her, "She would take a drink with the boys and spoke in their idiom, including some pretty rough language when she was talking about the bosses. They might think her a little peculiar, perhaps. It was an odd kind of work for a woman in those days, but they knew she was a good soul and a friend of those who most lacked friends." Mother Jones had a complete disregard for danger or hardship and would go wherever she thought she was needed. And she cared no more about approval from union leaders than mining operators. Wherever people were in trouble, she showed up to lead the fight with tireless devotion. She had a lively sense of humor. She could tell wonderful stories, usually at the expense of some boss, for she could not resist the temptation to agitate, even in a joke. And she exuded a warm friendliness and human sympathy, and always she was with her people. Mother Jones cherished her image as a fighter, and introduced to a crowd as a great humanitarian once she snapped, "Get it straight, I'm not a humanitarian, I'm a hellraiser." She was a militant matriarch, uniting the family of labor through her words and her raw physical courage. In an age of outrageous exploitation, her fight was wherever people organized for humane hours and decent pay. She was the Johnny Appleseed of American activists, giving speeches and organizing across the continent, sleeping in workers' cabins and boarding houses or the homes of friends. Asked to state her residence to a congressional committee, she declared, "I live in the United States, but I do not know exactly where, because I'm always in a fight against oppression, and wherever there's a fight going on, I have to jump there. So I really have no particular residence." Mother Jones spent most of the rest of her life taking care of her kids, living on the road, and raising hell. Jones remained a union organizer for the United Mining Workers into the 1920s and continued to speak out on union affairs almost until she died. She struggled with rheumatism and the consequences of age in the 1920s, but worked as much as she could. With the help of young journalist Mary Field Parton, Mother Jones produced a biography which was published in 1925. Mary Harris Jones died on November 30th, 1930, in Silver Springs, Maryland. Thank you for your life, Mother Jones.
Oh, thank you, David. That was just right. Perfect. Yeah. I'm not going to do my union part of my service, but I'm going to talk about the spiritual dimension of work. How many people here had a job they loved, just loved? Yeah. How many people lost that job? How many people lost that job? Okay. How many? Okay, good. I'll ask these questions later. I don't want to get too far afield here. The basis of this sermon is the idea that our lives are the creation of our own minds. That's one of the, I think, the basic principles of humanism, is that our lives are our own creation event in the long run. You know, when we're children, you know, our parents kind of lay this social programming in on us, and than later in life. So maybe sometime in about 35, someplace in there, you start building your own life. At least, and if you don't, it's high likely that you'll have a crash somewhere along the line and start building it from there, from a more a difficult position. So at any rate, the Buddha says our lives are the creation of our own mind. And Shakespeare's Hamlet says, nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. And Milton very famously said, the mind is its own place, and in itself can make a heaven of hell and a hell of heaven. So today I'd like to talk about 3 ways that work can be a spiritual discipline. And I won't bother you with how I got in the union. I will say that I was a self-employed contractor, both union contractor and union carpenter. I still carry a union card. Did someone say they had a union card here at one time, a carpenter's card? Yeah, I got one in my wallet, so we can compare if you like. At any rate, so I really learned to love the union. I started teaching, organizing classes to apprentices and union members. I even made a promotional tape for the union. I was actually, I was the star. So, and of course, I spent quite a lot of time standing on picket lines, both here and there, and I believe very much in unionism. And the reason I believe in unionism, one of the reasons is that Karl Marx said that capitalism will destroy its own foundations, and we have certainly seen that since the 1980s, where there's been this tremendous push to lower taxes, and the amount of money going into the pockets of the wealthy is increasing, while the amount of money going into the pockets of middle-class people is remaining about the same, or even actually declining a bit. And of course, we know progressive taxation is important, but also unionization, democratization of the labor force is very important for staunching the flow of that money and keeping the money flowing where it should, so we can have a strong economy. And actually, Robert Reich, former labor secretary under Clinton, has said that yes, when taxation is appropriate, when organized labor is working, we have people do better, and I think that's a basic truth. So anyway, I did also supervise a lot of work when I was a carpenter, and I remember one day I was out walking about, and this guy over there, and I saw her as a carpenter, and he says, "Oh, you stupid SOB, you stupid SOB. Someone should just take you out and shoot you." Well, of course, I walked over there, and what was going on? Well, it turned out he was talking to himself. And yeah, well, you think that's funny. I mean, I suppose it is kind of funny. But the thing is that every once in a while, some of those little codes that we have programmed into our social programming come up. Now, this guy just made a mistake on cutting a piece of wood, an expensive piece of wood, one that we'd have to order another piece to work on. But at any rate, one of the ways that we can make that carpentry or any job can become a spiritual discipline is by learning how to pay attention to yourself, paying attention to those little lines of code that keep popping up, because someday they pop up, they make us feel miserable. And so we've gone all these years with this, idea that we can't make a mistake, the idea that we always have to be perfect, the idea that you always have to feel happy about what work is assigned to you. That's just simply not true. When we feel miserable when we encounter these lines of code, and when we learn how to pay attention to them, we can also learn how to cancel them out and install some new lines of code in our social programming. So another time I worked with quite a few apprentices, and I had a young apprentice working with me. We were working in the Golden Dome at Notre Dame administration building, and I said, "Come on, give me a hand with this." This young guy, and these doors were made in like 1874, and they were 8 feet high, and they were heavy, and we had to carry them over to a spot where they would be going to be refinished. So I said, "Grab the other end of that door," and the young man grabbed the other end of the door, and I picked up the front, and I took off, and there's a rotunda, if any of you have been in there, had a railing on it, a walnut railing. And so I went around the railing once, and then I took him around again, and then I took him around again, and he finally said, "Well, Jim, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm teaching you." And he didn't say anything, so we went around again, and finally he said, "Well, what are you teaching me?" And I said, "Well, I'm teaching you to question authority, which you have learned because you just questioned me." So